Yeah, without a doubt, sometimes we've been so disciplined with one approach that as we get into retirement, our thinking needs to change, right? Because we've invested, as an example, invested for growth for 30 years while you're working, and now you have to invest for income.
More and more, we're seeing that once people have retired, they are coming to the realization that the way they've arranged their finances and affairs actually can work against them achieving their ideal outcome and their goals once in retirement. To talk about that transition and why we may need to rethink the way we are arranging our finances, we have Chris McIntire, president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services, your common sense approach to planning, ladies and gentlemen, your resource across Northwestern Ohio, and always a pleasure to be joined with Chris. We appreciate the time, Chris. Thank you for being here. How's everything going in Chris's world?
Hey, not too bad, Peter. Good to be with everybody. It's been a hot and a cold kind of summer here up in Northwest Ohio, and you never know what you're going to get up here.
Yeah, well, we always appreciate the time that you share with us, Chris. I do want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got questions or concerns about your own planning, how to arrange your affairs in an optimal manner, you are always welcome to give McIntire Retirement Services a call, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532. Chris, for most of the people that you talk to, most of your clients, they've been hard working, they've been careful, they've done a couple things very, very well, but we are seeing that this transition to retirement kind of brings to light the fact the way that we have been taught to do things may actually work against us in retirement.
Yeah, without a doubt, sometimes we've been so disciplined with one approach that as we get into retirement, our thinking needs to change, right? Because we've invested, as an example, invested for growth for 30 years while you're working, and now you have to invest for income. And, it's a whole different approach, different asset classes and whatnot. So you almost have to retrain the brain, if you will. And obviously for those that are retiring, husbands and wives are now could be together for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where they hadn't been that way for 30 years. So there's a psychological adjustment and also an investment adjustment as well.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the financial side here on the program, but the mental, emotional, and psychological elements of retirement have to play into the conversations of planning as well. We've got to envision what we see ourselves doing the day after, the month after, and for the decades after we retire. And Chris, for a lot of people, retirement is not just kicking the feet up on the lazy boy and drinking coffee on the porch 24 hours a day anymore. Like, we are staying active. Some of us are taking trips and doing activities. Some of us even want to stay involved and active in some kind of employment situation. Maybe it's part time, maybe it's just a rewirement. But for many of us, capable, able bodied, still active, still motivated, we are needing to fill that time and finding something to do. Just to talk about the psychological aspect and the flip flop a little bit as we're talking about these pillars of sound financial planning.
Yeah, and a good example is my dad, for example. My dad's 92, and he still plays golf. And the other day, I got to brag on him here. He shot a 73, on 18 holes, for being 92 years old, as playing from the upfront. But
I'm glad
upfront
you
too.
clarified the 18 holes because I have also shot a 73, but only on nine.
Yeah, yep, I'm with you too. Yeah, for me, I'd usually do it on 8 holes and end up walking away mad. But when my dad retired, and he was a white collar worker. When he retired, he still worked part time. So my dad was in the appliance industry, so he sold appliances to the outlets, for example, and people around Northwest Ohio. I'd say Swint Reineck here in Fremont when they were here, Appliance Center up in Maumee, which is where my brother works right now. My dad sold them the appliances that they sold to the customers. And then when he retired, many of his former clients said, "Hey, why don't you come and work part-time for us?" So, he did it. It kept him mentally sharp, give him a little bit of extra play money. And, he might not admit this, or he might now that he's 92, but, it also gave him a little distance and a little freedom from an elementary school teacher that he married.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Now, we find, Chris, that there are big changes in retirement, both in life and in money and finance. And of course, this is Game Plan for Retirement. We focus generally on the financial side, but I think that this is often an overlooked part of the conversation, is really kind of envisioning what your day-to-day routine is like and what is filling your time in retirement. But I do want to get back to the root of our conversation, which is the financial side. And Chris, you put together for your clients what you have called the Game Plan for Retirement. I think aptly named, also the name of the program here. It is looking at the 5 critical pillars of sound planning, and something that you have emphasized you believe every plan should address: income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and legacy. Those 5 critical areas should be addressed with everyone looking to maintain lasting financial confidence in the decades through retirement. And many of your clients have probably done a good job. I'm going to just assume here, correct me if I'm wrong, but working for a living, earning an income, and being diligent with some of that income in getting it invested, making investments during their working career. But it's almost like a yin and yang here, and the two sides flip once we retired. The investments were dependent on our income, and then all of a sudden our income becomes dependent on our investments. Do you find that that alone is kind of a shock to the system for some of the diligent savers and investors you've worked with?
Yeah, yeah, without a doubt, it's when you deal with married couples in particular, and you're starting to talk about somebody retiring and the investment side of things, and the income is, it's almost like a good cop, bad cop situation, because one of them is incredibly nervous, the other one might be very relaxed. It's not it's uncommon that both of them would say, okay, we've planned and everything looks so good, everything we've talked through, and we have nothing to worry about. That's not human nature, right? We always worry about something, and predominantly it's one spouse versus the other. Though, typically, maybe the male is more aggressively invested in the female, with those maternal instincts, is wants to be a little more defensive, is very common. So, trying to coach them through the good, the bad, the indifferent, and whatnot. Because we have many clients with, where the wife is much more conservatively invested than the husband is. And, we make the plans complement one another.
Yeah, but the fact that we start making withdrawals from that investment that we've never done before, do you find that people kind of get a little bit more anxious? The anxiety level goes up, everything sort of tightens up. Like, we want financial freedom in retirement. That is the
Yep.
goal. That's what we envision. And then all of a sudden, I feel like I am going to be scared to spend a little bit in those first several years of retirement when I want to be enjoying my life and that the free time that I finally have.
Yeah, no question about it. And, and we can line this right up with the performance of the stock and the bond markets, the real estate market. Real estate's an income play as well, too. And, a good example would have been in 2022. They raised interest rates 11 times, one of the worst performing years for the bond market, which most people would say is traditionally their safer side of things, but they raise interest rates 11 times in a row, and bond values went down significantly. And stocks also came down significantly. So if you retired in 2021 and then all of a sudden in 2022, the stocks are down 15 to 20% and the bonds are down 15 to 20% and you're pulling money out of it, that can be nerve-wracking. So what we have, and where we provide peace of mind for our clients is, having a safe strategy. They may have another income element story, right? We may have added a high quality annuity to help give them some income in addition to Social Security and pensions to cover those baseline expenses. and then leverage the portfolio for some of the extras, but we can also just pay out dividends and pay out interest. That's the nice thing about income, where, many people have been investing for growth, so they may have not invested in dividend stocks and, higher yielding types of bonds and other asset classes as well. So that's where we come in, and that's our niche in the space, is to say, look, here's the alternatives we have for income investing. Here's what we have for growth investing. And that's where you can provide some peace of mind for folks, is, showing them all of the different options that are out there versus just your retirement lifestyle 2030 fund that you've been putting your money in your 401k in, as an example.
Which, by the way, Chris, those were exposed to that downturn in the market in 2022, maybe more than a lot of people were comfortable with, because those target date funds tend to move to bonds and fixed income. And that was a year where it was maybe not the best place to be for people who were a little more conservative, correct?
Yeah, it sure was. And, the bond market's had a couple of tough years here. 2018, they raised interest rates, and then 2022 and even into 2021, bonds have, kind of lagged in performance, and they're performing in their normal capacity right now. And a normal, kind of a 60/40 portfolio is doing what a 60/40, 60% stock, 40% bond portfolio should be doing right now. Okay. 2022, both sides of that portfolio were down. And I think you and I, we did some radio shows talking about, is the 60/40 model broken, and it was for a short amount of time, but the nice thing about, when you own bonds, is they pay interest. Okay. The values of those bonds change every day, but if you hold them until they mature, you get your money back. So, not many people understand how the bond market really works and why they, it looks like they lost money in bonds when they're going to hold them to maturity. But, they have to be priced every day because it is a marketable security, as an example.
Again, we are talking with Chris McIntire. If you've got questions, if you would like to run a review and analysis of your portfolio, your investments, your retirement accounts, for the risks that you're taking, the fees that you're paying, the taxes that you may be liable for, how and where you can pull from to generate that income, that is all part and parcel of these 5 pillars that go into the game plan for retirement. Get your written plan outlining your goals and identifying them, conversations about what they are specifically, and then how your money is going to work to help you achieve those goals. So, a personalized plan with a long term time horizon, diversified strategies to help you get there. That is what the game plan for retirement is. 419-332 0532 is the number to call to reach McIntire Retirement Services. That is a complimentary courtesy service just for being a listener or viewer of the show. So, again, that number to get your game plan for retirement: 419-332 0532, 419-332 Or you can always go to the website, McIntyreRetirementServices.com, McIntyreRetirementServices.com. But again, Chris, with these 5 pillars, we've talked about 2 thus far: income and investments. And these are generally the areas that your clients have done a good job with, even though there's some complications, even though they change once we retire. A lot of us have arranged our affairs in a way that works to our advantage in these 2 areas. And I want to get to the areas where we are finding more and more as this new school or baby boomer wave of retirees, this new retirement wave has now made this transition. We are finding that we have been taught, we have been told, and we have followed the advice to arrange our affairs in such a way that we are now finding out is actually working against us. So the third pillar is taxes. And for many of us, we have taken advantage of tax deferral and tax delay during our working career. But now we're in retirement. Are you finding that a lot of your clients are surprised by the tax bill? And a lot of them are maybe looking back saying, man, I wish I had done things differently.
Yeah, but buddy, we have those conversations almost daily with clients that, they say, okay, I need to take some money out. What are the tax ramifications? And then we look and say, okay, well, 95% of your money is in your IRA accounts. Okay, so there are tax ramifications there. And if we pull too much out, we might bump you in from the 12% tax bracket to the 22% tax bracket. We're going to dump a bunch of your Social Security in that tax bracket, even after the big, beautiful bill, right? Social Security is still going to be taxable for many people, maybe just not as much of it, okay? But it is still a taxable, can be a taxable income piece. And then, where are their Medicare premiums at, right? That's all based off of income. So trying to help them navigate this minefield of tax loopholes and potholes to step in, if you will, is a challenge. And they say, well, why did I put all this money into this thing? All it's done is create another tax piece. It's like, well, because that's what everybody else was doing, and I mean, that's what people do. We get caught in that paradigm, and that's why we talk about Roth conversions and things like this, so that you can have more options when you go to pull larger lump sums of dollars out. Because if you got $1 million in your IRA, you think, man, I'm wealthy, I'm fantastic, and hey, there's a $200,000 condominium that we want to buy down in Fort Myers Beach. All right, well, it's probably 270,000 by the time you'd pay the tax on it. So, Uncle Sam does have his whole, he's a partner in this retirement plan as well. We need to manage and pay that person the least amount, or pay that entity the least amount as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to emphasize, Chris, that it has not been a mistake to save in these tax deferred accounts. And for a long time, for the vast majority of the baby boomers working and income earning and saving and investing lifespan, their careers, the tax deferred option of retirement accounts was really the only option. Like these Roth options were not even available until the mid 90s. I don't think were available into 401ks until the mid early decade of the 2000s, and really have not even been widely available for quite some time after that. So it's not just that, well, this is the way everyone was doing it. It was that was kind of the only way to do it for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And, tax rates were much higher. And now, and as time has gone on, they've expanded how much money we can put into our 401ks. And since it comes out of our payroll, it's, you don't miss the money. It's not like you have to discipline yourself to set it aside in your checking account because, look, not everybody's good at doing that.
One of the best advantages of the 401k that I don't have to do it.
Yeah, the other advantage there is that money's going in on a regular basis into your investment. So you're dollar cost averaging over the long haul. The tax ramifications for most people, they're like, they think, okay, well, heck, I got my tax bracket down this year, okay, and you repeat that over and over and over, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, now I got a $2 million IRA, for example. And again, I'm just throwing numbers out there. Don't be intimidated, big or small. But now I got a $2 million tax issue I got to deal with, and my beneficiaries are going to have to deal with that. And talking about these pillars here on the legacy side, that's why tax planning is so important, because it can impact other pillars down the road.
Yeah, and you hinted at this, Chris, but now we get to the real heart of the matter in our conversation today, which is that it is not just the tax on the withdrawals that we've been delaying. Which, by the way, the IRS figured out a long time ago that they enjoyed that compounding as well. And that it's a pay me now, pay me later system. We understood, hopefully we did not forget, that those taxes would be due at some point in the future. But it is not just the tax. It is these compounding effects in the other areas and these other pillars, these other goals that we suddenly find ourselves holding in a higher priority in retirement. So the taxes themselves, we've arranged our affairs in a way where we end up paying more taxes in retirement. But it also has these compounding effects. It can cause Social Security to be taxable. It can cause capital gains to be taxed at higher rates. It can cause our healthcare expenses to be increased. And it certainly has an impact on the legacy that we leave behind. So it's like this compounding effect that all of a sudden we realize, hey, we've set ourselves up in a less than optimal manner here. And now is the time to really look at this and examine this, Chris. I think the passage of the one big beautiful bill, we're glad that they've extended air quotes here for you all just listening on the radio permanently. But this really is a window of opportunity to sort of unwind this tax time bomb that we've built up for ourselves in our IRAs.
Yeah, without question. An example is my wife is turning 65, going on to Medicare, and she also takes Social Security. Okay. So, for most people right now who are retiring and at 65 and going on to Medicare, they'll withhold $185 a month out of your Social Security benefit. Well, we have all the business income, so they're going to withhold, I think it's $522 of Robin's Social Security benefit because our income meets other thresholds because of running a business and at least some degree of success with it. We pay a hell of a lot more than most people do.
And Chris, the trust funds that support these programs seem to be having trouble. We've heard for decades here now that Social Security's trust fund is running low and they will only be able to cash flow about 75 cents on the dollar of promised benefits starting in less than a decade here. 2033, I think, was the last date that I saw, year that I saw. Medicare Part A, again, the trust fund that supports that, running deficits significantly. However, those IRMA related monthly adjustment amounts that support Part B and Part D have allowed those trust funds to fare much better. And these additional income related fees are outside of the tax code. So, my question is here, with all of that tax deferred money built up in our IRAs that we're being forced to withdraw, and the government looking at these programs and saying, well, these two that we put an income related test on and charge people more for are doing well, could they look at that and say, hey, it's working over there? Why don't we apply that in other places? And sort of assess how that goes for those that have higher assets or higher income.
Yeah, the entitlement programs of Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid, are three of the biggest expenditures of our overall government. And then you add in defense and then interest on our ballooning deficit. Those are the five areas where most of the money is spent in the United States. And you're exactly right. I think we're going to see have to see some significant restructuring of the entitlement programs and who is entitled to get them. And I'm using my quotes there, means testing. That's probably a good definition of it. I think we're going to have to see more of that. I mean, the numbers don't lie. The only thing that lies is the politicians telling us that they're going to steal grandma's money and all that stuff. So yeah, it gets to be old, and our leaders don't have the courage to actually get some of these things done on both sides of the political aisle, right? I mean, these things are going to take Republicans and Democrats to help solve, to give some peace of mind to people. Because, hey, I'm 60 years old. I'm looking at, eventual retirement someplace down the road here. And it's like, all right, am I going to get my Social Security? How much is my Medicare going to cost me? I mean, I'm not worried about my own personal savings. I'm worried about things I don't really have control over, the government side of it, for sure.
Yep. Well, I think it has been a common goal for almost everybody, Chris. Earn as much income as we can, pay as little in taxes as we can,
Yep.
and that's oftentimes through the investing. So all of these pillars are interconnected. And again, most of your clients during their working career done a good job in effectively arranging, getting the income that they need, living within their means, investing in a way that grows the assets, plus reducing taxes with tax deferral. But our priorities shift at some point, and in retirement, as we are creating income, the taxes change, and we realize we've arranged our assets and deferred taxes in a way that works against us. And then there's this ripple effect, right? Higher taxable income impacts healthcare costs, the net income available for living expenses, poor tax planning or lack of tax planning, oversight in this area, which, by the way, I feel like there's a lot of oversight here, but it can also eventually leave our heirs with a heavier tax burden than necessary. And I can hear people out there right now saying, I'm not worried about leaving money to my kids. Right. Fair enough. Okay. Not a selfish statement. You've probably done enough for them and they're in a decent situation anyway. But the reality is, for most people with lasting financial confidence, certainly something is going to be left over. And if we ignore this proactive opportunity to be efficient, like we may end up leaving the IRS as one of our largest beneficiaries. And I don't think anybody wants to do that, Chris.
No, no, absolutely not. And I get it. So let's say you're married, you got plenty of money, you got four kids, and you're like, look, I'm going to let the kids worry about the tax situation and whatnot. You know, we might want to rethink that and say, look, it makes sense for you to do Roth conversions because you got four kids that are all doctors and lawyers and, higher income pieces or thresholds. You could pay the tax at 12%. They're going to pay the tax on the money they inherit at 37 or something like that. It's like, I mean, you want to win that game. That's where that Roth conversion piece comes into play. Because I literally have clients that say, we don't need the IRA money. We could continue just to invest and let it grow. But we want to give it to our kids. We're not going to give it to a charity. That's a different thing, right? I can leave a taxable IRA to a charity and they're going to get the money tax free, being a qualified charity. The children obviously are going to have to take that money and they got to pay out the IRAs over 10 years and, and maybe create a substantial more amount of income and reward the IRS more than they need to be. And, that's one of the issues.
Well, again, we've been talking with Chris McIntire, president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services, your resource, ladies and gentlemen, for the game plan for retirement, your game plan for retirement, a personalized plan addressing all five of these pillars and helping you identify where you can be more efficient, more strategic, where you can arrange your affairs for more optimal results into the future. It is a personalized plan specific to you and your goals and your situation, your timeline, your risk tolerance, your expectation for returns, your need for income, all accounted for here as he moves through these five pillars in planning: income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and legacy. And it's got a long-term vision with diversified strategies. Those are the values of having your written game plan for retirement, not just investments, but an actual plan for how and when and where those investments will be best utilized. And if you'd like to get that, put together for you, that is a complimentary courtesy service there that Chris McIntire and his team at McIntire Retirement Services offers. And if you'd like to take advantage, all you need to do, pick up the phone, give a call. It is 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532, or you can go online, McIntyreRetirementServices.com, McIntyreRetirementServices.com. Chris, I heard a pretty prominent financial voice the other day saying that Roth conversions made sense up to 65. It seems like what I'm hearing you say, and I immediately had hesitation when I heard this person say that, and I was like, I think there are reasons, but I hear from you what you're saying that there's no age limit potentially on Roth conversions. If you want to be efficient with your money, you need to plan it strategically, but there could be reason for this, an advantage to it, basically at any point, even if it is to leave a more efficient legacy behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Many different reasons that people want to do anything with their dollars, with their estate plan. And being tax efficient is one of the key pillars there, but we deal with people that say, like in your example, well, I can convert to a Roth till age 65. Actually, you got plenty of time to do that. 73 is when required minimum distributions start. So, we typically, generically speaking here on the radio show, is say, look, from 59 and a half to 73 is typically your ideal time to do Roth conversions because at 59 and a half, you can take money from your 401k and move it into an IRA and then convert it, in bits and pieces there. Sometimes your 401ks aren't, the custodial agreements aren't the mechanisms for multiple transactions. It's typically a place where you put money and you contribute and grow money, and then you move it outside the 401k where you have a little wider latitude of different types of investments and taxation issues. Because you make a withdrawal from an IRA, you can tell the custodian how much in tax to take out. On your 401k, it's a mandatory 20% tax withholding. So, sometimes we do Roth conversions. Somebody takes $100,000 out of an IRA and they move 100,000 into their Roth, and then they pay the taxes out of money that's already been taxed, like savings accounts or something like that. So, couple of examples there of why you need to work with a professional on some of these things here for sure.
The nuances of planning make all the difference in your results. So, ladies and gentlemen, get your plan in your hands, your game plan for retirement to improve your financial outlook. Give Chris McIntire a call, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532. Chris, always a pleasure. We appreciate your perspective and time here on the program.
Hey, my pleasure. Good to be with everybody. Hope you're having a good summer. Be safe, and God bless America.
Tune into Chris McIntire's full radio program and visit McIntireRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.